If you visited the channel in the past year to look at all the videos I haven't been uploading, you might have noticed that I'm a fan of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series. See? My new avatar has a little Part 6 Jotaro hat. We're practically twins. It's also no secret that I love legacy stories. Hell, I've practically got I Heart Castlevania tattooed on my left shoulder. But of all the franchises I enjoy that do the same thing, I think JoJo's is actually the best at it. So today, the plan is to explore something that I think often gets lost in all the memes and stand battles, the importance of legacy in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And to do that, we'll have to start at the very beginning.
君はディオブランドだね。
そういう君はジョナサン・ジョースター。
Because Hirohiko Araki envisioned JoJo's as a legacy story from the very beginning, Part 1, aka Phantom Blood, has the important job of laying the groundwork and establishing information for everything that will eventually come after. Our stage for this part will be 19th century England. Besides the incredibly brutal carriage crash that serves to introduce aristocrat George Joestar to grave robber Dario Brando, who he mistook for saving his life, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure may not seem so bizarre at first. But what's important is we meet our two main characters, the teenage sons of the aforementioned George and Dario, Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando. The introductions of each character tell us a lot about them. Jonathan appears as a noble soul who comes to the aid of Irina Pendleton, even though it is a fight he knows he cannot win, simply because it is the right thing to do. We immediately get a sense of young JoJo's determination when he promises Erina that someday he will win. While Jonathan lives a privileged life in Joestar Manor, Dio is quite the opposite. Coming from poverty, Dio is a survivor, and after the death of Dario, moves to become something more. An underdog to be sure, but Dio's intentions are to gain more power, and he'll be as ruthless as he has to be to get it. Something that becomes evident from the moment he moves into Joestar Manor, something George allows to repay Dario's phony kindness all those years ago. From the moment they lock eyes, Dio marks Jonathan as his enemy, someone he must break to secure the Joestar family fortune. And the first red flag of this is when he attacks Danny, Jonathan's dog, then promises JoJo that they won't be friends. The rest of the first episode and first chapter are focused on how Dio attempts to break Jonathan. He convinces Jonathan's friends that he's lame and steals them, causes George to look down on him, and even burns Danny alive. This all causes JoJo to fall into a deep despair, but he finds friendship once again in that girl from before, Irina Pendleton. The pair of them become practically inseparable, even developing feelings for one another. But obviously, Dio can't have that. He and his cronies corner Irina, and Dio forces himself on her, stealing her first kiss so Jonathan can't have it. Then he smacks the shit out of her. As a result, Irina becomes too ashamed to face Jonathan again, but Dio made one fatal mistake: underestimating JoJo's determination. Up to this point, JoJo had managed to cope with all the torment he'd faced, but when Dio brought Erina harm, he'd taken things too far. Jonathan snapped, and the result is the first real physical encounter between JoJo and Dio. The first brush with destiny. Initially, much like their boxing match, the fight is in Dio's favor. But remember what we know about Jonathan. He's determined, and through that determination, eventually he will shine through. JoJo realizes if he doesn't beat Dio here, then he'll have lost more than the battle, but also control of his own life. Taking matters desperately into his own hands, Jonathan turns the fight back around on Dio and starts kicking his ass in a way that's nothing short of satisfying. It's also the first time that Dio takes Jonathan seriously and sees him as a legitimate threat. The fight gets interrupted by George, but Dio realizes that if he's to destroy Jonathan, a different approach might be necessary. The story proceeds with a 7-year time skip that shows the young men both Jonathan and Dio have grown into, each about to graduate university with different life tracks in mind. Dio is a law student and JoJo studying archaeology. But the important takeaway is that they've made peace with one another at some point in the last 7 years. Seemingly. Jonathan hasn't forgotten what happened between them, and Dio is merely taking a different approach than before, opting for a more subtle method of takeover. This reinforces what we already knew about Dio. that he's a survivor, and he's capable of adapting to his circumstances. This is especially important to note as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure finally starts living up to its name. Enter the Stone Mask. I haven't mentioned it yet, but up to this point there's been emphasis placed on a mysterious stone mask in possession of the Joestar family. It was with Mom Joestar's things when the carriage crashed and was seen hanging on the wall when JoJo and Dio fought. As an archaeologist, Jonathan discovers that this mask his mother once owned can be activated by contact with blood. While studying the family library, JoJo discovers a letter from Dario detailing the symptoms of a sickness that he possessed before his death, one that mirrors the very sickness George has come down with, and comes to the conclusion that Dio has been poisoning their father, which turns out to be true. Jonathan promises Dio his plot has failed, and leaves to have the medicine analyzed so that he can turn it over to the police, which leads him to London's infamous Ogre Street, the place that Dio purchased the poison, and where his regular life comes to an end as he crosses the threshold into his true adventure. Dio, however, has other plans. Showing that he truly covers all his bases, Dio has also been studying the stone mask, and believes that if the spikes pierce Jonathan's brain, he'll die instantly, and decides to follow JoJo so he can kill him using the mask. Meanwhile on Ogre Street, Jonathan gets into a fight with a trio of gangsters. Valiantly, JoJo defeats them, reinforcing his resolve and introducing him to Robert E.O. Speedwagon, who respects Jonathan for his gentlemanliness and decides to aid him. Speedwagon introduces a new dynamic that will go on to be prevalent for the rest of JoJo's, but we'll get back to that later. Meanwhile, Dio drunkenly stumbles around town assuming that Jonathan got killed on Ogre Street and encounters some muggers of his own. Dio uses the mask on one of them and uncovers the truth of it. The mask transforms the wearer into a vampire. This encounter tells us two things. Vampires boast a tremendous power, something Dio takes immediate note of, and also that they can only be killed by sunlight. These rules will continue to be relevant for the next two parts. Dio returns home to discover Jonathan has beaten him there, and with evidence of his crimes. From here, everything changes. Dio attempts to convince Jonathan he's ashamed of his behavior and wants to turn himself in, but Speedwagon appears, demonstrating his talented ability to read people and their intentions, balancing out JoJo's naivete. George arrives with the police and it appears that Dio is toast. But once again, he adapts. Dio, attempting to claim more power, rejects the limitations of his human form and uses George's blood and the stone mask to become a vampire. Vampire Dio then makes use of his new supernatural powers to kill all of the cops, leading to JoJo and Dio's second fight. This fight is far more brutal than the other. Feeling responsible for unleashing this monster onto the world, Jonathan courageously fights against Dio with anything he can find, hoping to find a method for which he can defeat him and finish things. The clash of strong wills is evident as Dio unleashes his inner evil against his enemy, and Jonathan demonstrates his determination to win, even if he knows Dio is nigh invincible. This scene demonstrates in its fullest the most important takeaway about Jonathan, that he's a heroic gentleman with a true sense of justice. With both parents now dead and Joestar Manor burning down around him, Jonathan thinks there's nothing left in the world for him, and tries to destroy Dio, even if he himself dies in the process. Thanks to fire, and the fact that Jonathan impaled him upon a statue, Dio is temporarily destroyed, and luckily, JoJo lives to tell the tale. The destruction of Joestar Manor is a symbol of Jonathan's old life coming to a close, and the beginning of his new one. Speedwagon brings him to the hospital and decides to remain by Jonathan's side as his friend. But, as if by destiny, who would happen to be JoJo's caretaker but Erina Pendleton? Speedwagon puts it best.
人の出会いってのは運命で決められてるのかもしれねえな。
While this isn't a formal introduction of fate as a concept, it is curious the role that it plays in JoJo's. While Jonathan and Erina rekindle what they had before, the pair encounter a strange man named William Antonio Zeppeli. Enter Hamon. Baron Zeppeli strikes Jonathan's chest in such a way that altered his breathing and unlocked his inner potential to use a mystical art called Hamon. Zeppeli tells Jonathan that he's been hunting the stone mask for decades, and knows that not only is it intact, but that it's in Dio's possession. Seeing JoJo's natural potential with his own eyes, Zeppeli decides it's him who can save the world, and begins training him how to use his powers. Though he may seem silly, Baron Zeppeli plays the role of the mentor in Phantom Blood, whose experiences will propel Jonathan to new heights via Hamon. Hamon is essentially using photosynthesis to perform sunlight karate. Much like JoJo is thematically the opposite of Dio, Hamon is thematically the opposite of the mask, creating great power through life rather than through death. The user breathes in a special way that manipulates their blood flow and allows them to generate the sun's energy through their bodies, which they can use to fight, heal, stretch unnaturally, and interact with organic matter. All the while, Dio has returned and with his vampiric powers, decides he has the opportunity to claim more power and influence than before, and begins recruiting underlings to serve him. With the idea that he is now a superior being, Dio believes he can eventually control the world. So this wasn't originally in the script, but the idea of Dio controlling the world is interesting. You should probably remember that one. JoJo and Baron Zeppeli spend a week together training after that, in which Zeppeli explains the mask's role in his past and the monastery from which he learned Hamon. Speedwagon arrives to inform them that Dio's been spotted, and the journey begins. This is the first instance of a party joining the protagonist on their adventure, one that stays consistent throughout all of JoJo's. Like I said before, Baron Zeppeli is the mentor, teaching Jonathan and inspiring him to achieve greatness, while Speedwagon acts as a companion, offering Jonathan insight into the world and reminding him of the humanity they fight for. To prove his newfound might with Hamon, Jonathan defeats both Wang Chun and Jack the Ripper in combat, even killing the latter. The time has come to face Dio once and for all. Our party finds themselves in a town called Widnight's Lot, the place where Dio's set up shop in a castle, and who else is waiting for them but the man himself. Up to this point, Hamon has pretty much been a one-shot for every vampire, but Dio's had time to practice and experiment with his abilities. By vaporizing the moisture in his body, Dio can make contact with and freeze a Hamon user's blood flow, which proves effective even against a Hamon master like Baron Zeppeli. Once again, we are reinforced that Dio, while arrogant, has a scholarly mind and is always reaching to determine his limits and become as powerful as possible. Dio then resurrects two fallen knights called Bluford and Tarkus, and these two fights are truly a highlight of Phantom Blood. The first is with Bluford, who wields the Sword of Luck and can manipulate his hair like tentacles. This is a great fight because Jonathan gets to truly put his newfound Hamon skills to the test in various creative ways, while facing off an opponent with a very similar will to his own. Both of them are men of honor who refuse to use underhanded tactics to win. As much as Bluford wishes to kill Jonathan, he wants to do so in a fair fight, echoing Jonathan's own sentiments and perhaps foreshadowing something to come. Jonathan's will and inner strength are a sight to behold in this uphill battle, and it's admirable. Even when it looks like he's about to lose, he finds a way. This culminates in JoJo's use of the Sunlight Yellow Overdrive, his most powerful Hamon attack, which defeats Bluford but also momentarily restores his human soul. Jonathan and Bluford have a heart-to-heart about humanity, in which the knight gives JoJo his Sword of Luck, adding a P in blood for pluck. This is strong symbolism, as Jonathan will now carry his two defining character traits with him into battle. Luck, the ability to succeed, and pluck, determined spirit and courage. Tarkus is a different story. Whether by his size or strength, Jonathan is unable to defeat him and falls into his trap, getting a chained neck clamp forced around him. But Baron Zeppeli intervenes. He recalls a prophecy from his own master, who once saw his fate would be to die as a Hamon warrior. And, due to complications during the fight, this is exactly what happens. It was his destiny to die saving Jonathan, but Baron Zeppeli was not bitter towards his student. As a final act, Zeppeli passes on his Hamon to Jonathan, and asks that he take up his torch and finish the mask for good. Now more powerful than ever before, Jonathan tears off the neck brace and annihilates Tarkus in a single blow, making him pay for what he had done. As he dies in Jonathan's arms, Baron Zeppeli lets it slip that he was once married, but abandoned his family in search for the mask, and despite that, has no regrets. He passed on everything he had to Jonathan, who he saw like a son, and makes him promise to eliminate Dio before he passes on.
19世紀イギリスの作家
ウィリアム・ M サッカレーは言った。愛してその人を得ることは最上である。愛してその人を失うことはその次に良いと。
Heavy-hearted, JoJo and Speedwagon move on to make their stand against Dio at his castle. But before they get there, they meet Zeppeli's master, Tonpetty, along with two fellow Hamon warriors named Dyer and Straits, who Zeppeli had sent a letter to requesting backup days prior. Together, the five of them move to attack the castle. On the way in, JoJo wipes the floor with one of Dio's minions, and Team Hamon warrior reaches Dio's balcony, where the vampire is waiting.
地獄から戻ってきたぞ、ディオ。
生きてたのか、ジョジョ。
Dyer attempts to defeat Dio with his Thundercross split attack, but gets slain almost immediately as Dio proves what a non-threat he feels Hamon is, leaving Jonathan as the sole one to stand against him. At this point, we're treading familiar territory, but never like this. Not when each of them was at their peak. Once again, Dio is in such a place of power that he believes nothing can touch him. And for the third time, it's Jonathan's will against his arrogance that spells Dio's defeat at JoJo's hands. Drawing the Sword of Luck and Pluck, JoJo slices Dio's arm off in a single Hamon-filled strike, and then carves him straight down the middle. It looks as though Jonathan has finally surpassed Dio, but we know their characters, and we know that's not how Dio does things. Dio freezes Jonathan's arms, puts himself back together, and grabs one of JoJo's arteries between his fingers, able to kill him in an instant. Much like their first battle, Dio finds himself on the cusp of victory, finally able to rid himself of Jonathan, who has been a constant thorn in his plans to grasp power ever since the beginning. But as JoJo frees himself up for a final clash, he refuses to give up. Dio believes his power has surpassed anything Jonathan can dish out, but in dipping his hand in flames and infusing them with Hamon, he proves just the opposite. Dio attempts to stop it, but Jonathan shines through and in a single blow, defeats Dio once and for all. Right before he falls though, he uses one of his other vampiric abilities to fire high-pressure liquid from his eyes in a final attempt to kill Jonathan, but is unsuccessful. JoJo faints after all the fatal battles he fought that night, but the journey is over, and it's time to return home. The world is saved. The gang returns home, with Speedwagon even going the extra mile to smash the stone mask on the way. Jonathan and Erina get married and choose to honeymoon together in America. This has been a long time coming, and it's sweet to see them finally getting to be together, the struggles of their lives behind them at last. Speedwagon and the Hamon warriors see them off, and the future looks bright as Jonathan and Erina Joestar sit down to have a dinner together. So why is the episode called The Final Ripple? Everything's okay, right? Right? Way back during his training, Jonathan defeated Wang Chan in battle but never killed him. And as Dio fell from the balcony, he was able to detach his head before JoJo's Hamon could travel there and kill him. Now aboard the honeymoon ship, it's time for round 4. Or at least it would be. Dio states that he's grown to respect Jonathan's power and spirit. He wishes to claim Jonathan's body as his own because of how closely their fates were bound. Before JoJo gets a chance to react, Dio fires his foreshadowed eye beams, and they pierce straight through Jonathan's neck, cutting off his breathing, while Erina can do nothing but watch. As zombies attack the ship, Erina grabs a baby girl who lost her parents, and watches in horror as their fairy tale ending is torn away from them. But just like Dio the survivor, even when all bets are off, Jonathan Joestar does not give up. With his heart set on saving his beloved Erina, JoJo uses the last of the Hamon in his body to strike and kill Wang Chan, whose body gets caught up in the ship's gears. This causes the ship to then slowly explode. Jonathan and Erina share one last kiss, and with his final breath, he tells her to run, to keep on living. As Erina climbs inside Dio's coffin, Jonathan holds Dio's head in his arms so the pair of them will die together, bidding Erina a final farewell. The ship explodes, taking Jonathan Joestar with it. I'll leave it up to you if this was a fitting end for him, but I know it always gets my feels. For all his struggles, for all his hardships, Jonathan Joestar's life ended a tragedy. In the end, his heroic spirit wasn't enough to overcome Dio. But there is hope. As the morning sun rises and Erina emerges from her hiding place, baby in hand, we learn that she's pregnant. Jonathan's work may be unfinished, but those who come after, those who carry his will, his luck and pluck, will finish the job, ending the events of Phantom Blood. It's been 20 minutes and we just finished talking about part 1. Sorry, I know it was long, but I believe it's very important to have a thorough understanding of Phantom Blood to fully appreciate what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the video. Rest assured, I won't be recapping parts 2 and 3 like I did for Phantom Blood. Part 2, Battle Tendency, is a sort of detour in the Joestar family versus Dio storyline, by proxy of the fact that Dio isn't actually in it, but it still plays a very important role in the bigger picture of that storyline. Battle Tendency plays the role of a sequel near perfectly, simultaneously pushing the story forward while also providing background for things that Phantom Blood introduced, such as expanding on the stone mask and its origins. You've got some returning characters like Erina, Speedwagon, and Straits, but Battle Tendency also does a great job establishing new cast members that are some real fan favorites. It also features a time skip of 50 years following the end of Part 1. Those 50 years weren't particularly happy ones either. Erina raised hers and Jonathan's son, George II, largely by herself, though I imagine Speedwagon dropped by every now and then. Speaking of Speedwagon, the lucky guy struck oil in America and used his fortune to create the Speedwagon Foundation, a medical and supernatural research team, and that's gonna come in handy. By the time World War I rolled around, George became an accomplished fighter pilot and married that girl Erina rescued on the honeymoon ship, Elizabeth, who gave birth to their son. But as if we didn't know fate was cruel already, it turned out one of George's superior officers was a cunning zombie, who Dio had created all those years ago. George went to confront the zombie, but without any hormone training, it ended up killing him. Now how the hell does that happen? Once again, Dio is inadvertently responsible for the death of a Joestar. He's 3 for 3 so far, jeez, but some people are just fated to meet each other. So Elizabeth, who does know hormone, went ahead and killed the officer, only she killed an officer, and thus had to go into hiding, leaving her baby boy in Erina's care. Who is this baby boy, you might ask? Well, follow me to 1939, New York City, and you might just find out. Meet
Joestar. Joseph Joestar.
our main Battle Tendency protagonist. He may look a bit like Jonathan, I guess, but you'll see he's quite a bit different. The first time we meet him is when Smokey Brown decides it's a good idea to steal a 6'5" British guy's wallet. But some racist cops catch him and beat the shit out of him. Luckily for Smokey, this is when Joseph cuts in. Keep this scene in mind moving forward, because Joseph's introduction says a lot about him. He actually lies to the officer and tells him that he gave Smokey his wallet as a gift, defending a helpless, bullied stranger. Sounds familiar. And Smokey even robbed him. Deep down, there is a little bit of Jonathan in Joseph, which tells the audience, despite how the part may go, Joseph Joestar is our protagonist and Jonathan's successor. The cops see through Joseph's lie and start to berate him in the same way, but Joseph decks his ass in the face, showing his impulsiveness, and then dares the other cop to shoot him, demonstrating his cockiness. Things that we didn't see from Jonathan. Also, unlike Jonathan, and his own father for that matter, Joseph can use hormone, and use it he does, blowing off the cap of a Coke bottle to shatter the cop's trigger finger. Now this is also interesting. Battle Tendency doesn't make this very clear, it's kinda all over the place in the power scaling regard sometimes, but the fact that he can use hormone without any formal training tells me that Joseph is in fact a hormone prodigy. Meanwhile, Speedwagon called Straits, who's replaced Tom Petty, to meet him in Mexico, where he's made a dreadful discovery deep beneath some Aztec ruins. A bunch of stone masks, all with slight variations, surrounded by a large man encased in stone, called a Pillar Man. Now you'll remember how much trouble one stone mask caused them 50 years prior, so understandably, Speedwagon is a little freaked out. But Straits isn't. He kills Speedwagon's dudes, then beats him up to leave him for dead. Straits decided Hamon wasn't keeping him young enough, having secretly admired Dio. He takes a mask and uses Speedwagon's blood to become a vampire, deciding to go track down Erina and Joseph to kill them. So that's kinda where the plot leaves us. Joseph and Smokey get into some antics where he intimidates a cab driver to show us how short a temper he has. Then they meet up with Granny Erina to go eat some Italian food. Then JoJo beats up another racist. But to do it, Araki introduces what makes Joseph unique. Unlike Jonathan, who fought mostly straight up head to head, Joseph is a master strategist and tactician, able to read opponents and manipulate elements of the battle to guarantee his success. He also has a habit of predicting what they'll say next. Much to their shock. It never gets old either. Right after that, a mafia guy who knows reps from the Speedwagon Foundation tells Joseph and Erina that Speedwagon died and Straits is responsible. Joseph beats the guy up for upsetting Erina, but the line she says about what happened 50 years ago to still be affecting them today hits hard. It's the reason Jonathan is dead, the reason Joseph has no parents in his life, and the reason why Speedwagon is now seemingly dead, like a curse the Joestar family can't seem to escape. A little later, Straits, now young again, shows up in New York to kill Joseph while he and Smokey are hanging out. This is the fight where Joseph pulls a Tommy gun out of his ass and lights Straits up like the 4th of July. Unfortunately, we know our vampire rules, and this is useless. While Jonathan was always motivated by justice, and Joseph is motivated by revenge, they both share the desire to protect their loved ones, Erina and Speedwagon, while fighting their respective vampire battles. Straits attempts to I-beam Joseph straight away, and we actually see the beam strike him, which is a great call by Araki, because Jonathan's death will still be fresh in the reader's minds, creating suspense. But Joseph isn't Jonathan. Using careful strategy and with the advantage of knowing how his grandfather died, JoJo uses mirrors to trick Straits with a decoy, then blasts him with Hamon. But Straits isn't Dio either. He's studied Hamon for years and knows all about how it works, and with his Hamon conducting scarf can counter Joseph. But, once again, Straits is thinking like he's facing Jonathan, and he's not. Joseph's placed a grenade on Straits already, and it explodes, splattering Straits in all directions. I've always appreciated this fight because it makes use of legacy in such a creative way. The reader is in a similar boat to Straits, knowing Jonathan's way of doing things and expecting that from Joseph. But Araki can not only then introduce Joseph's way to the reader, but also subvert their expectations of what the main character can be in JoJo's, which paves the way for the very protagonists in the future. Of course, Straits isn't actually dead, and without any options left, it happens. This is one of Joseph's most memorable scenes, and you don't need to tell me that it isn't something Jonathan would have done. What defines Joseph is his role as the trickster, as one who outsmarts his opponent, and sometimes that means running away and making them chase you to figure out a new strategy, which is exactly what he does here. Straits corners Joseph on what I think is supposed to be the Brooklyn Bridge, with a hostage in the form of a woman, supposedly testing what kind of man he is. Straits has begun to figure out what we already know, that Joseph and Jonathan aren't exactly alike. While JoJo pretends not to care about her at first and insults Straits for using such a tactic, once the vampire actually hurts her, the script flips and Joseph proves he's still the hero of our story, leaping in to rescue her. Straits tries to I-beam Joseph again, but as they approach, JoJo proclaims he's already figured out how to defeat him, and Straits was an idiot for using the same attack twice. The beam ricochets out of a Hamon shot glass, then he head-on uppercuts Straits with a Hamon-infused strike. As Straits dies, he warns Joseph that he'll soon likely meet the man in the pillar, part of a destiny he cannot escape. Straits laments that he won't get to see who or what the man in the pillar is before dying, as vampires do. Joseph decides if he can't avoid this man in the pillar, he should head to Mexico in order to confront him. Hard cut to Speedwagon. Speedwagon survived and is now in the custody of a Nazi group in Mexico, sent to study occult stuff under the command of one Rudolf von Stroheim. Not only have they captured Speedwagon, but they've also now captured the Pillar Man, who they need Speedwagon to spill the beans about. The Pillar Man wakes up and Speedwagon starts to panic because he knows whatever's in there is worse than a vampire. And he's right. The short of it is, Pillar Men are faster and stronger than vampires, can contort their bodies in all kinds of gross ways, learn new information rapidly, and they can absorb living matter straight into their bodies. The only thing they have in common with the vampires they create is weakness to the sunlight. Stroheim names this one Santana, because of course that's what you do. To the shock of absolutely no one, Santana learns intelligence and escapes, then stuffs himself inside a dude. Also to the shock of absolutely no one, bullets have no effect on him. Luckily, JoJo's been kicking ass all the way down there, and he's here at last to save the day. Kinda. So, how's our first fight with the Pillar Man go? Not well. Hamon doesn't wreak havoc on Santana like it would a vampire. Instead, their abilities simply cancel each other out, and thus Joseph and Stroheim have to work together in order to lure Santana out into the sun, with a tremendous cost for the latter, having his leg amputated and then blown the hell up by a grenade. The Speedwagon Foundation also figures out there's 3 more Pillar Men, all stronger than Santana. Joseph on his own won't cut it, so Speedwagon decides it's time to put a team together. Rome. In a quaint restaurant, Joseph first encounters this blonde womanizer. A showing of noodle warfare then reveals to us that whoever this guy is, he knows Hamon. And not only does he know Hamon, but he knows Speedwagon too. This is our ally. You probably wouldn't have known just from looking, but we know him. Or rather, we know where he comes from. This womanizing Hamon student goes by Caesar. Caesar Zeppeli. Much like Joseph is the grandson of Jonathan, Caesar is the grandson of our dear old Baron, holding true to the theme of battle tendency, which so far has been finishing the fight started in Phantom Blood. This is about the time our team dynamic comes back around, but unlike his granddad, Caesar is Joseph's equal, and since they don't immediately get along, comes out being somewhat of a friendly rival. Well, mostly friendly. Caesar's backstory is kinda tragic. So remember when Baron Zeppeli alluded to the fact that he had children? Well, that child was Mario Zeppeli, who wasn't very good at Hamon but decided to take up the Baron's torch anyway, abandoning his many, many kids in search of the stone mask. Caesar turned to a life of crime as a way of lashing out at the world for being abandoned, but managed to track Mario down as he was doing some tracking of his own. Mario traced the stone mask back to the pillar beneath Italy, in which 3 of the Pillar Men, creators of the stone mask, resided. With Caesar as the only witness, Mario is absorbed into the pillar, which inspires him to keep the torch lit by learning Hamon. So, a big part of his character are the ties that bind him to his father and grandfather, which plays into the legacy theme and sets Caesar apart from Joseph, who isn't as in touch with that. Meanwhile, the Germans did their best, but the UV lighting they had available wasn't enough to keep the Pillar Men from awakening. Meet Wham, Cars, and AC/DC. The 3 of them have the same abilities as Santana, but they each have something extra on top of all that. Wham has the ability to generate powerful gusts of wind. AC/DC can manipulate the heat of his bloodstream, and Cars has a toothed arm blade that can cut through anything. If you thought the Germans wouldn't be able to stop them, you were right. Here's a lore dump, but it's a great example of battle tendency taking advantage of the groundwork laid in Phantom Blood. Here, it's revealed that the stone masks were created by the Pillar Men in ancient times, and when combined with the mystical artifact called the Red Stone of Asia, which can reflect and refract light, will turn them into even more supreme beings, free from weakness to the sun. What kept the stone out of their pillar hands back then was none other than the Hamon clan, which tells us this: vampires, Hamon warriors, Pillar Men, this stuff has all happened before, and it's because of Dio's actions that it begins again. Will history repeat itself? Let's find out. Joseph and Caesar arrive in the Under Colosseum cave and engage the Pillar Trio. Caesar's Hamon bubble is able to hurt Wham, but the Pillar Men have experience with Hamon. AC/DC bodies Caesar pretty quickly, but Joseph and his trickery manage to get a few hits in with his Hamon clackers, except this only pisses Wham off, and he uses his windstorm abilities to take Joseph down. With his breathing all screwed up, Joseph tries to run away again, but a short minecart ride later, and Wham has him cornered. thanks to his amazing intelligence, Wham is also able to outthink any strategies JoJo can come up with. But here's another thing that sets Joseph apart from Jonathan. Wham is an honorable soul, so Joseph takes advantage of that. He promises that in 1 month, he'll be powerful enough to defeat him, so if Wham wants a good fight, he should let them go. Surprisingly, this actually works. Joseph and Caesar will have a 1 month before they face the Pillar Man in a rematch, and they're gonna need it, because this fight went abysmal for them. Caesar may have more control over his Hamon than Joseph, but there's not enough a difference between them to have the same dynamic as their grandfathers. So, they go pay a visit to Caesar's Hamon teacher instead. Remember Elizabeth Joestar from before? She goes by Lisa these days, and as the de facto Hamon master, she plays the role of the mentor in Battle Tendency. Joseph doesn't really know she's his mom either. Lisa takes the boys to Air Supply Island, which is basically a massive Hamon training ground. This part is charming, if for no other reason than it's interesting to see what Hamon training is like. We only saw snippets from Jonathan's training, which was informal, mind you. So to see Joseph and Caesar thrust into a room with a giant, oil-slicked pillar, and tasked to use their Hamon to climb it and escape really comes as a surprise. You probably wouldn't expect it either, but there's a lot of action and development while climbing this pillar. Joseph and Caesar both grow as warriors, people, and closer as a duo. All this time, Joseph has also been wearing a mask to focus his breathing, and get his wild Hamon under control, which is cool because it's something we've never seen before and presents a negative consequence for Joseph's natural Hamon manifestation going untrained all those years. As Joseph and Caesar continue to train and grow as Hamon warriors, we also find out Lisa has the Red Stone of Asia, since it was passed down through the Hamon clan to her. Joseph's skills are put to the ultimate test though when AC/DC shows up on the island looking for the stone. What follows is a fight between them on top of a spike pit that sees each of them trying their hardest to push their abilities and minds to the brink in order to gain the upper hand on one another. The battle culminates in Joseph pulling tight the string he'd laid all over the battlefield. And filling it with Hamon to destroy AC/DC's body. This battle is absolutely Joseph's time to shine, and after so many fumbles, prove himself as a warrior on par with his grandfather, maybe even surpassing him, symbolized by the destruction of his breathing mask. He no longer needs training wheels. And all this is still true even if AC/DC technically survived. His central nervous system attaches itself to Joseph's back, but he's not dumb enough to take control of a Hamon user, so he waits until another host presents itself. Enter Suzy Q. She's Lisa's attendant and Joseph's love interest. We don't see much development between them besides this flirting scene, but clearly the most important takeaway about Legacy is that the Joestar men are into blondes. Oh, and of course that ladies love Joseph. Anyway, AC/DC possesses Suzy Q to try and get to the Red Stone, but Joseph and Caesar manage to eventually drive AC/DC away from her body and kill him. Also, Lisa is naked the entire time. Unfortunately, AC/DC did manage to stick the Red Stone on a mailboat to Switzerland. Joseph promises Suzy Q he'll come back for her if he survives, then he, Caesar, and Lisa hit the road. Switzerland! The trio arrived to find the Germans one step ahead of them, specifically Stroheim, who returns with new ultra-cool cyborg implants because German science is the best in the world. But Kars shows up to nab the stone, and even Terminator Stroheim can't go toe-to-toe with him. Kars wants Joseph because of what happened to AC/DC, but once the Red Stone goes flying down a cliffside, they have to race each other while facing off to get a hold of the stone. Some quick-witted thinking from Joseph and a little help from Caesar allows him to walk away with the Red Stone of Asia in hand. But this short-lived battle between the pair of them establishes Kars as an intimidating force to be reckoned with. Joseph was able to defeat AC/DC, but Kars' ability leaves the reader feeling like he's untouchable, and while the heroes have the upper hand now, you get the sense that that could easily shift. This happy moment is short-lived though, because then shit gets nasty. Caesar wants to go after the Pillar Men and finish them off while they're ahead to finally get revenge for their grandfathers. But Joseph doesn't think that matters at the moment. This offends Caesar, who takes so much pride in his family legacy and causes him to storm off to do it himself. In an abandoned Swiss mansion, Caesar confronts Wham, and with him, his destiny. I'm sure you all know where this is going. Caesar fights valiantly and nearly even defeats Wham, but in the end, it isn't enough. Before he dies though, literally crushed under the weight of his ambitions, he has one last thing to do. Sealing it in a bubble of his own blood for Joseph to find later, he gives up the last of his hamon. This is textbook legacy. Caesar, a character who was driven by following in his grandfather's footsteps, does just that. Zeppeli sacrifices himself and gives JoJo the last of his hamon to empower him and carry him to victory. Caesar's sacrifice may even be more emotionally impactful because the reader gets to spend more time with him and see his relationship with Joseph grow from animosity to brothers in arms. As far as exits go, not bad, Caesar. Heavy-hearted, JoJo and Lisa now make up two hamon users against Wham and Cars' two Pillarmen. A sequence of events leads Joseph to a chariot battle with Wham, in which the pair face off, and he's able to honorably get revenge for Caesar. However, with respect for Wham, whose character arc as the honorable Pillarman comes to a satisfying conclusion. Cars, however, is not an honorable Pillarman. In the final battle, he makes his presence as a scumbag villain very clear. He cheats to defeat Lisa, and even though Stroheim and the Germans, Speedwagon and the Foundation, hell, even Smokey show up, there is nothing that can stop Cars from uniting the Red Stone of Asia with the Stone Mask, turning him into the ultimate life form. Without any clear way to kill him, Joseph snags the Red Stone and does what he does best. Like before, Joseph knows he needs to make Cars chase him. It'll get him away from the others and give JoJo time to think of a plan, but it's not looking good. In this form, Cars can manipulate his body in accordance with anything naturally occurring on the planet. This means he can shapeshift, grow bird wings, shoot piranhas, and more. Stroheim tags along with Joseph to try and give him a hand, but there's nothing he can do. Joseph tries to dunk Cars in a volcano to see if that'll kill him, but it doesn't, and Cars cuts his arm off. To add insult to injury, Cars even decides to kill Joseph using hamon. But, in his finest hour, something clicks for Joseph. He does not give up. With a little bit of pluck, he parries Cars' hamon with the Red Stone of Asia, which refracts the light and causes a chain reaction in the volcano, causing it to erupt and launch them into the atmosphere. And, with a little bit of luck, the debris blasts Cars further out into deep space, completely stunned by the idea that Joseph had planned all this from the beginning. Even if he hadn't. With Cars lost in space forever, Joseph falls as he re-enters Earth's atmosphere, in a death that parallels Jonathan's. A final sacrifice against the main villain to protect his loved ones. Except Joseph isn't Jonathan. Araki subverts his fans' expectations in the most beautiful way by having Joseph show up to his own funeral, now married to Suzy Q, and with a prosthetic robot hand courtesy of Stroheim. Much like the juxtaposition between Joseph and Jonathan, the only way for Battle Tendency to live up to the somber conclusion of Phantom Blood was to have a happy one. The heroes have won. In the coming years, Speedwagon and Arena both pass away peacefully to join their family. Smokey becomes the mayor of New York, where the Joestar family moves. Lisa remarries, and Joseph and Suzy Q have a daughter named Holly. Isn't that nice? With an ending as sweet as Part 2's, with the Stone Mask and Pillarmen defeated, I'd love to tell you that's the end of the fighting. But it's not. Part 3, Stardust Crusaders. The big one. The conclusion of the old, the beginning of the new, and the bridge that ties them both together. Once again, we find ourselves 50 years after the events of Battle Tendency, in which the world has actually been a fairly peaceful place, despite the bomb dropped at the end of the part. Dio is back. However, in the meantime, all's been well. Joseph started a successful real estate business which made the Joestar family very wealthy. Holly ended up meeting a Japanese jazz musician by the name of Sado Kujo, who she fell in love with and ended up marrying. What are the results of such a union, you might be wondering? All will be explained in Japan, year 1988. Holly arrives at a police station to pick up her son, who recently locked himself behind bars. Our new JoJo, Jotaro Kujo. This first appearance is striking, especially for the protagonist and especially where his predecessors are concerned. I mean, come on, he's locked up in jail. He calls his mom a bitch. Jonathan and Joseph in their introductory scenes both arrive to perform some kind of selfless act. So what's Jotaro's deal? Well, he's more like them than you might think. Jotaro isn't exactly what he appears to be, and I think sometimes this is lost on people. While Jonathan was the courageous gentleman and Joseph the steadfast clown, Jotaro is the stoic hero. In his opening scene, he is performing a selfless act. Bear in mind, I said Jotaro locked himself in jail. They called Holly because the police couldn't get him to leave. Jotaro is protecting everyone else from him, or more accurately, the evil spirit that manifests around him. Yeah, everything changes in Part 3 in regards to the Hamon system being replaced by the Stand system. By the end of Battle Tendency, especially where the Pillar Men were concerned, it was becoming increasingly clear that Araki was bored of Hamon. The solution? Change how the characters fight. Introduced in Stardust Crusaders are stands, a physical manifestation of a person's fighting spirit, each with a unique appearance and abilities. Jotaro's stand is called Star Platinum, which punches really hard and really fast, with reaction time and eyesight like nobody's business. Obviously, the theory that Star Platinum is Jonathan's ghost is absurd. That isn't how stands work. However, the fact that the physical manifestation of Jotaro's fighting spirit happens to look a lot like Jonathan is something I'll let you draw your own conclusions about. But, to me, coincidence or not, it serves as a physical reminder of Jonathan's legacy that Jotaro carries with him at all times, especially where the subject matter of the part is concerned. That's not to say Part 3 is completely without Hamon, though. No, familiar aspects are still around, and Stardust Crusaders is also the first time we get to see a JoJo from the previous part return as a mentor. After all the drama in Part 2 regarding the death of Jonathan and the brokenness of the Joestar family, it seems pretty simple now that when Holly sees her son exhibiting some kind of supernatural powers, she just calls her dad, who also exhibits supernatural powers. I personally really love the airport scene. It's very fulfilling to see Joseph again, now an old man who lived a long life after his victory over the Pillar Men in the previous part, something we never got to see from Jonathan, which further juxtaposes the two of them, just like Jotaro will now be juxtaposed against Joseph. Just like Jonathan was Joseph's grandfather, Joseph is now Jotaro's grandfather, and it just feels right. And it also feels right that after dealing so heavily with the sins of the past in his own part, that Joseph would return to finish the job and face the final enemy from the past alongside Jotaro in this new one. I also really like the line he says to Holly, because it sort of serves a double meaning. He's reassuring his daughter in-universe that he can get all this sorted out, and we believe it too, because out of universe, it's Araki reassuring us. Yes, things are new, there's less familiarity here than before, and motherfucking Dio Brando is back after all the shit we saw him do in Part 1, so it's a little scary. But our previous protagonist is here. This is the same guy we just saw come out on top of 3 Aztec demigods against all odds. It's still the same story as before. This is just another notch in it. We can count on Joseph Joestar, just like we did before. So, we head on back to the prison, where Joseph tries one last time to get Jotaro to leave. But he's got backup too. Since Caesar died in the last part, Joseph has a new friend now named Muhammad Avdal. Avdal is a fortune teller from Egypt, and he too has a stand called Magician's Red, which, yes, it is a buff chicken. But it has fire powers, which is a great way to show off how stands vary from Hamon and what they can do. This is also the first time Star Platinum gets to fight, and Jotaro manages to overtake Avdal pretty handily. Now, Avdal wasn't seriously going all out or anything, but he's still shocked from the strength of Jotaro's stand. which tells us this: Jotaro has a fighter's spirit. But we'll come back to that later. For now, out of his cell, he learns what a stand is and decides everything's all clear. Because Joseph knows what Araki's going to do next, he explains the plot. Stardust Crusaders, so I've heard at least, was designed as a jumping-on point for new readers. But what Joseph explains to the others here I feel resonates more if you've experienced the events of Phantom Blood. Return 100 years ago to that night on the Atlantic Ocean to see the whole thing recontextualized. Recall how Dio wanted Jonathan's body. So, JoJo creates a scenario in which Erina can escape. He bear hugs Dio's head, he dies, the ship explodes. All familiar. Rewind the video by like 25 minutes if it's not. However, more happened that we didn't see at the time. We know our vampire rules, so an explosion like that wouldn't have killed Dio. Much like how he was reborn after the fire of Joestar Manor, Dio was remade following the ship explosion with his head now firmly attached to the body of our Jonathan Joestar, further stealing from him and perverting his legacy. It almost feels like a taunt both at the reader and at the Joestar family. Apparently there was another coffin too, which he chose to slumber in for 100 years until his return. Just like always, Dio is a survivor, and here he is again. Dio, who tore Jonathan's life apart. Dio, who rejected his humanity and became a monster. Dio, who directly or inadvertently killed George Joestar, Baron Zeppeli, Dyer, Jonathan, and George Joestar II. Dio, who wanted to rule the world, and now with his vampiric abilities and stand power as a result of being pierced by one of the stand arrows, is more than capable of doing so. That day on the Atlantic, not only did Jonathan Joestar lose his happy ending, but the future was doomed as well. Or was it? What I said originally about that day is still true too. Dio may have outlived Jonathan, but his spirit persists. That day represents hope still just as much as doom, because it ensured when Dio returned that there would be someone left to stop him. And so begins Stardust Crusaders. While Joseph and Avdol are at the Kujo household with Holly planning their next move, it's back to school for Jotaro. But this is JoJo's, so it'll be anything but a regular school day. Here we meet Noriaki Kakyoin, a fellow student of Jotaro's who has been implanted with a flesh bud of Dio's that can control him. See, Dio is aware of the modern Joestar family and wants to take out Jonathan's descendants, aka the biggest threat to him. This is never explicitly stated, but I theorize Dio uses the mind control flesh buds rather than just turning his minions into zombies now, because zombies wouldn't have the capacity to effectively use their stands. That's right, Kakyoin is a stand user too. His stand, Hierophant Green, has the ability to stretch a bunch, take control of people, sometimes, and shoot emeralds or something. Hierophant is kinda weird. So he and Jotaro come to blows in the nurse's office, where some schoolboys and the nurse herself get caught in the crossfire. And it's here that Jotaro gives a little speech. This is one of Jotaro's most defining character moments, and I've sat here at my Google Doc trying to write this part of the script for a while now. When it comes to JoJo's, and particularly the character of Jotaro Kujo, I sometimes run into a case of interpretation versus authorial intent. And what I mean by that is, I have a certain interpretation of Jotaro that I'm not sure Araki intended. I feel like if he heard what I had to say, he'd probably just go, no, he acts like a Clint Eastwood character because that's cool, it's not that deep. But then again, maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. After all, this is a very intelligent man. But here's what we know for sure. At one point, until seemingly even very recently, Jotaro was a nice young man, dare I say even gentlemanly, just like someone else we know. But at some point, he became more rude, stoic, and even angry. What he says to Kakyoin is that he knows he isn't the best guy, that he's gotten into fights, disregards authority, and dines and dashes from time to time. But he recognizes what true evil is. Jotaro lays it flat that true evil is the strong using the weak and the innocent for their own personal gain, like how Kakyoin has with the nurse. which he condemns and promises to personally judge in one of my favorite scenes in all of JoJo's. This is why I feel that of all the other protagonists in the series, Jotaro is the most like Jonathan. Both of them started out as very similar characters, but something caused Jotaro to develop in a separate way. However, despite that, Jotaro adheres to a code of justice, much like Jonathan does. He claims to recognize evil and sees it as his personal mission to undo it, much like his predecessor. He bears other similarities though to another character we know in a way. A mother who loves him and a father who he resents, if we look at the subtext a little at least. Kinda like Dio. Jotaro has a fighter's spirit, which is why his stand was so strong, much like how Dio has a survivor's spirit that clings on. However, the reason that Star Platinum looks like Jonathan in my opinion would come down to application. Unlike Dio, who wants to control the world for power, Jotaro reserves this drive for an amount of control that he desires so he can protect the world and those he cares about, which is one of the driving motivations of his character not just in Part 3, but in Parts 4 through 6 as well. Jotaro is Jonathan placed in Dio's circumstances, which is why he came out differently and why he works perfectly as Jonathan's successor in the battle against Dio. Carrying the will and strength of his ancestor, Jotaro weathers the storm of evil to rise against it. At least, that's how I justify the whole same stand dilemma. I hope literally any of that made sense. So, Jotaro beats the shit out of Kakyoin and takes him back to the Kujo residence. He removes the flesh bud from Kakyoin's head, and then Joseph uses Hamon to destroy it. Joseph uses Hamon in Part 3 only a few times, so it's always really cool when he does, and it's nice to see that history of Hamon versus vampire flesh being referenced. Cause after Part 3, it'll never happen again. Also, there's something else I haven't mentioned yet, which I probably should have. So some stands manifest naturally, as is the case with Kakyoin and Avdol, but most require the stand arrow, which was made from a chunk of space meteor or something like that. So Dio got pierced by the arrow and thus developed a stand. But because Jonathan's body was pierced, the ability was also passed down through his bloodline. Obviously, Jotaro got Star Platinum, and Joseph actually got a stand called Hermit Purple, which he can use to conduct Hamon and smash cameras to produce plot-relevant pictures. Holly also gets a stand, but she isn't a fighter. A horrible sickness falls over her, like her stand is rejecting her. Joseph calls up the Speedwagon Foundation, but even then there's nothing to be done. We knew that we needed to stop Dio before, but now suddenly Holly's life is on the line. So it's time for Team Stardust Crusaders to hotfoot it to Egypt, cause they have a vampire lord to face. Parts 1 and 2 kinda had the team dynamic like I alluded to before, but in Part 3 it becomes much more prevalent, which stays consistent for Parts 4, 5, and 6 as well. Filling the role of the protagonist this time is obviously Jotaro Kujo with his... Playing the mentor this time is our returning JoJo, Joseph Joestar, and his... Also along for the ride are newcomers Mahavid Avdol with... And to pay back the kindness of his rescuers, Noriaki Kakyoin with his... But this group will also go on to expand when they meet Jean-Pierre Polnareff with his stand, who is hunting down one of Dio's henchmen for murdering his sister. Polnareff starts out only aligned with the Crusaders to get back at his sister's killer, but eventually ends up bonding with them and becoming a true member of the team. Silver Chariot's ability to cut through just about anything at rapid speeds also ends up coming in great handy for the Stardust Crusaders, making Polnareff one of their heavy-hitting stand users. Also along will be someone a little stranger. This is Iggy, and he must have a stronger fighting spirit than Holly cause his stand is called the Fool. Yes, he is a dog. There aren't really any rules for what can and can't be a stand user, as long as they've got a fighting spirit. He'll be along to help as well on this journey that carries the Crusaders from Japan to Egypt the short way round. And what a journey it is. Stardust Crusaders is 16 volumes of manga and 2 seasons of anime, with 2 separate OVAs and even a video game adaptation. Unlike the last 2 parts, it would be almost impossible for me to summarize it here, but its importance to JoJo's cannot be understated, both in and out of universe. These 5 guys and their journey across the world is truly something special. Because I can't really summarize it, I'll list some of my favorite fights from the journey. Jotaro versus Darby the Gambler, Kakyoin and Polnareff versus Jay Guile, Joseph versus Empress, anime version, and Jotaro and Polnareff versus Anubis. Fighting Dio's stand user assassins the entire way, they overcome impossible odds, they learn courage and tenacity, and they do it all together. Key relationships are Jotaro and Kakyoin, Kakyoin and Polnareff, Jotaro and Polnareff and Avdol. But the Stardust Crusaders all build up a bond with one another throughout their quest that allows the reader to see them in fun, personable moments, as well as in intense battles, which makes them much more endearing characters. It makes the reader care, which makes what happens next hit so much harder. The Crusaders stand on the doorstep of Dio's mansion, preparing themselves for what's to come. You may feel like we've been in this exact spot before, and we have. A likely purposeful parallel to Phantom Blood. To try and cover more ground, the team splits up to go face their respective stand users. While Jotaro, Joseph, and Kakyoin play video games with Darby the Younger, Avdol, Polnareff, and Iggy confront Dio's right-hand man, Vanilla Ice. Everything goes downhill very fast from here. Within seconds, Avdol sacrifices himself to protect Polnareff, to the shock of everyone. At this point, the reader will be filled with a sense of dread that they'd almost forgotten along the way, how they felt in Baron Zeppeli and Caesar's final moments. But Araki didn't forget, and this time, he's going to be brutal. The fight rages on through multiple rooms and levels of the mansion, with both Polnareff and Iggy trying everything they can just to survive against this seemingly unstoppable stand user, who can phase anything he touches out of reality. What they don't know is, Dio has turned Vanilla Ice into a vampire like him, which is why conventional methods, even when Polnareff gets shots in that should kill him, don't work. Things get even more desperate as Iggy too sacrifices himself to protect Polnareff. But at this point, our fighting Frenchman is starting to catch on, and now he's angry. See, he knows his vampire rules, and Vanilla Ice doesn't. Cutting the curtains in the room apart to let the sun set in, all Polnareff has to do is nudge his opponent into the light to avenge his fallen comrades. Things get even more serious from here. As Polnareff ascends the stairs to the top of the mansion, unable to know if he was the last man standing, he comes face to face with Dio. As we know, Dio's gained new power, and just as becoming a vampire did, stand power makes him very arrogant. He toys around with Polnareff until suddenly, Jotaro, Joseph, and Kakyoin all burst through the wall to help their friend. Now with the opportunity to kill Jonathan's descendants, Dio stops playing. The confrontation spills out onto the streets of Cairo, where night has now fallen, meaning the ball is in Dio's court and he knows it. None of the Crusaders can lay a finger on him, and they can't figure out why. That is, until Kakyoin focuses in on the clock tower. Dio's stand is called the World, and it has the ability to stop time. This is the strongest stand ability we have seen so far, and it makes sense, doesn't it? What we've known about Dio since the very beginning is that he has a tremendous fighting spirit, Dio the Survivor, and his desire to control the world manifested in this ability to stop time, to make him unstoppable. Tarot cards aside, that's why Dio's stand is called the World. It's a metaphor for the power he was given to rule just that, and this time, nobody can stop him. Just after figuring out Dio's ability, in one of the most infamous scenes in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Kakyoin is impaled through the chest by the World and killed, lest you forget the stakes that we're dealing with. However, his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Thanks to Kakyoin, Joseph is able to figure out the World can stop time and does what he does best. Runs away to come up with a plan. However, unlike when he was against even ultimate cars, Joseph's strategy for running away was always to buy himself time, but against the World, that's simply impossible. They cat and mouse across the rooftops of Cairo, and there's even a cool scene where Joseph attempts to fool Dio into destroying himself by wrapping himself up in hermit purple covered with Hamon. But Dio sees through the ruse. Despite all his cunning and planning, even Joseph Joestar, defeater of the ultimate life form, can do nothing in the face of Dio's World. And in overcoming Joseph, Dio has also overcome Hamon, the very thing that spelled his defeat last time. At this point, it looks like nothing stands in the way of Dio's conquest. But one Crusader still remains. One Joestar still remains.
ほう、向かってくるのか。近づかなきゃ。ザ・ワールド
Jotaro Kujo vs. Dio Brando. The Streets of Cairo, 1988. This may not be the best fight in JoJo's, but I don't think there's anyone who would disagree with me for saying it's the most important. This is the moment that the first 3 parts spent building up to, and it's the moment that will define the storyline for the next 3 parts, much like the previous Dio battle. Let's get into the opponent's heads a little here. For Dio, this is it. Everything he's ever been after is a single kill away. The freedom of total control. He's survived for 100 years to get to this point, and the only thing standing between him and the goal he's sought all this time is the descendant of his long-dead rival, the last one. And Jotaro knows he's the last one. To his knowledge, all of his friends have been killed by this evil standing before him. To make matters worse, every succeeding member of his family has also been killed by Dio. George, Jonathan, George II, Joseph right before his eyes, and Holly on the very cusp of death at home. Jotaro knows that he's the only one left to stand against Dio. The fate of the world rests on this clash of opposing destinies, and even though we didn't know it yet, the fate of the entire universe. The 2 stand users come to blows, and Jotaro demonstrates his legacy in an interesting way during this encounter. He faces Dio head on, but his determination is evident from the fact that he isn't holding back like he did in every other fight. Here, he's going straight for kill shots without any hesitation, much like how Jonathan went about it during his Dio battle. But the world's time stop isn't something Jonathan ever had to contend with, and Jotaro has an answer for that too. The magnet, the book trick, the playing possum, and hiding in the sewer all demonstrate a very Joseph-like strategy, who he spent the part learning from. This is how Jotaro fights against Dio, with the courage of Jonathan and the cunning of Joseph, the culmination of both his predecessors. But this alone isn't enough to stop Dio. The infamous road roller scene has Jotaro completely on the ropes. Dio's victory is almost assured. But during this fight, Jotaro learns something new about Star Platinum that ironically, he never would have known if Dio hadn't shown him first. Just like I alluded to before, the pair of them have very similar stands. And what this means is, Star Platinum also has the ability to stop time. Even though I tried to justify it earlier, I acknowledge this is one of the biggest asspulls in manga history. However, here it just kind of works. I can't really picture the character of Jotaro or this fight without it. Plus, it gives him the ability to give Dio a much needed taste of his own medicine by breaking his leg while in stopped time. When time begins to move again, both of them stand in a final face-off, like a Western duel. Whoever strikes with their stand first is going to win. But Dio is a survivor, and he'll use any kind of underhanded tactic he has to win. He sprays his blood into Jotaro's eyes, blinding him. But Dio has underestimated a Joestar man before. And with a little bit of pluck, Jotaro's Star Platinum strikes blindly, fist clashing into the world's kick. And with a little luck, that leg so happened to correspond with Dio's injured one, meaning that all of Star Platinum's power was sent straight into Dio, collapsing and destroying the vampire's body all at once, putting him out of commission with all the shock of a false king being removed from his throne. It took a century, but Dio Brando's survivability was finally bested by the unbreakable spirit of Jonathan Joestar, through his descendant, Jotaro Kujo.
たった一つのシンプルな答えだ。てめえは俺を怒らせた。
The world is saved. The Speedwagon Foundation picks up Jotaro, Polnareff, and Joseph's body. Through a little bit of plot contrivance, Jotaro is able to use Dio's blood to revive Joseph, which I don't mind either. It would have been a shame for Stardust Crusaders to go back on Battle Tendency's finale by not letting Joseph keep his happy ending. In the desert the next day, Jotaro and Joseph expose Dio's remains to the sunlight, destroying him at last with the spirits of their fallen companions watching over them. At Cairo International Airport, the two of them say their goodbyes and part ways with Polnareff, who is off to return to France. The journey of the Stardust Crusaders is at last complete. And thus, a boy named Josuke stopped crying. A child named Haruno was neglected. A priest named Pucci began his master plan. A woman named Holly returned to good health. A man named Polnareff had his revenge. And with his grandfather, Joseph Joestar at his side, and the work of his grandfather, Jonathan Joestar complete, a young man named Jotaro Kujo returned home, cementing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as the greatest legacy story ever told. As always, thank you so much for watching.